What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. We're actually multiple times per day on Tuesday through Friday throughout the month of June as we're connecting with guests from all 32 NFL teams. This is day 2 of the series, the All 32 series. We're breaking down the NFC East and AFC East this week, and to break down the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, the most hyped Buffalo Bills team since the K-God of the 1990s, Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic. What's going on, buddy?
Oh, nothing much. How are you?
I'm good. And also you have your own podcast, The Buffalo Beat, a show about the Buffalo Bills. If you don't have a podcast in 2020, what is the point?
Exactly. I mean, I think we were a couple of years ago we started that, and even that felt late. And so now, yeah, if you don't have one, you got to get with the times here.
I mean, it used to be I guess I started in 2010 at CBS. It was like if you didn't tweet, then people like judged you. And now it's like if you don't have a podcast, people judge you. It's like, do you even exist? Are you even a real are you even a real NFL writer if you don't have
not just media either. I mean, here in Buffalo, there's so many fan podcasts. A lot of them are really good. Yeah, there's a lot of I can't keep up with them all, honestly. And some of them are really good. So there's no shortage of voices out there these days, especially with podcasts.
I find that kind of fat, and this is Devo. Eric, the producer, is going to kill me because I tangent on literally every podcast. But I do find it fascinating that because 10 years ago you didn't have, I mean, you had plenty of fans who had blogs and people who would eventually turn into media members. But do you think that the average fan is? I think the average fan is exponentially smarter when it comes to analyzing football than they were 10 years ago. Agree or disagree?
I would agree. I think a lot of voices get amplified, which sometimes makes it harder to find the smart ones these days. And there's, a lot that, the lines are blurred between traditional media and, fan media. And I think it raises everybody in a lot of ways, because there's some smart people that you can do a lot of smart content without a press pass. And that makes, people like me and other people who cover the team and are in the building, it kind of, makes us need to raise our game to match what other people are doing, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of really smart things. And it varies, I think, market to market, but I think that it's made media better in general, and it's made fans smarter because there's way more, tools to educate yourself.
No, I mean, I think it's a great call, because it's back in the early 2000s, you could be a beat writer for an NFL team and not mail it in, but you could go through the motions and you're going to get credit for being a good beat writer. And now it's if you go through the motions, you are you're going to look like your bosses are reading some fan blog and they're like, wait, well, how is this guy better than the guy we're paying to do it? Obviously that's not the case at The Athletic. You guys are banging out tons of great content. When you look at this Bills team, it's a little weird because, okay, here's what I think people have been saying, and I don't know if I agree with it or not. I think I do to some degree, but not entirely. People have been saying that the 2020 Buffalo Bills are this year's version of the 2019 Cleveland Browns. Does that seem fair?
I don't know if that's I don't know if I like that comparison.
I don't think I do either.
I think I would compare them, if you want to take the cynical angle on the offseason hype, I think I would compare them to the Bears of last year. After taking a step forward, winning a lot of games, their young quarterback showing some progress, it kind of went sideways a little bit. I don't envision them, kind of combusting the way the Browns did. They don't have the offseason hype train in quite the same way, because they're not built the same way. This has been a slower build than what the Browns did. They also don't have Freddie Kitchens. They have
that's a great point.
They have a coach who
Sean McDermott is an awesome coach.
Yeah, he's not perfect. And I think he still has some things to prove and some things to improve on. But he's not Freddie Kitchens. He's shown that he can get something out of this team even when they don't have a lot of talent. He did that in 2017. And last year they were, I thought, for the most part, a pretty well coached team. His game management is iffy in spots, and nobody's going to accuse him of being a cutting edge offensive mind, but at the same time, he's got a program built. He and Brandon Beane have built something that I think is a little bit different than what the Browns were doing. So I look at the Bears as an example. If you want to be, a little bit cynical, that maybe the progress they showed last year was a little bit of fool's gold because you're not sure about the quarterback and they had a pretty easy schedule. That argument I would buy, but the Browns are just a little bit different because the Browns, we've seen that show before where they get the hype and they don't come through. And this team isn't as loud and in your face about the offseason hype as that one was.
No, I think that's a great call because it's easy to do it because it's like, all right, this is a franchise that hasn't won a ton in recent years, although secretly the Bills have had much more success than the Browns have since coming back to Cleveland. They trade a first-round pick for a wide receiver who's had some, sort of fell out of favor in the old spot. So you could see the comparisons, but I agree. I think if you told me the Bills went 8-8, I'd be like, all right, well, things went south for them, but they have Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, as you point out, have built such a high floor for this team. That's what I think is so interesting about it. And if Tom Brady doesn't leave, maybe all this hype isn't happening,
Yeah, I think that's fueling a lot of this. The fact that Tom Brady's gone. I know it's
somebody has to step up and take the division, right?
And that's what's fueling a lot of the optimism in Buffalo. It's like finally they're out from under the thumb of Tom Brady, and people are looking for somebody to step in and fill that void. And it's not fun to sit here and say, well, the Patriots will just keep chugging along. That's not interesting. People have been waiting for years for somebody else to take over. I think it's still very much possible that the Patriots continue to do what they've done for a long time. They won't be quite the same without Tom Brady, but they still have Bill Belichick. But I think there's a lot of people who maybe missed last year with the Bills, didn't see the jump coming, and are trying to get on the hype train now and make up for it. But I'm with you. I could see them going in that 8-8, 9-7 range. I think it would be a disappointment for a lot of people, but I don't necessarily see things blowing up in a major way unless there's injuries and other things that we can't, foresee.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, if everybody gets hurt, they're going to lose a bunch of games. But I think one of the things that they've done in terms of building this high floor that the Bears did to an extent, and this is what the Browns didn't have, was if their young quarterback struggles, they can still win games. And or the Bills have done a good job, and I'm not saying they're trying to hide Josh Allen, but they want to win. They've been winning with running the football and playing defense, and that's just what Sean McDermott does. I mean, he did it. He was a great defensive coordinator for Carolina, great defensive coordinator in Philadelphia. He went to. He took over. He took over. When he took over the spot in Philly, it was a tough spot, and he got a bad rap. But I digress. My point being is that if they can win, even if Josh Allen doesn't take a leap, the question then becomes, can he take a leap? And what do you envision Josh Allen doing in 2020?
That's a $1,000,000 question.
And or are you on or off the Josh Allen train? Because I feel like there's nobody who's side saddling it.
Right. It's a weird. It's very strange. The Josh Allen. He's so polarizing, and so the Josh Allen kind of train is a weird one. I think you're right in the fact that they can win games even if he doesn't take a huge step forward. Obviously, their ceiling is pretty much entirely dependent on how he plays.
Yes.
If he becomes, the quarterback that they think he can be, then this could be a legitimate, contender for the AFC. If he's the same quarterback as last year, I think their ceiling is kind of capped at what they were last year because, it's hard for me to envision him taking a massive step forward this year, to be honest. I think he took a pretty big step forward last year, but I think there were still a lot of things that are wrong with his game. His deep accuracy was among the worst in the league. He still did a lot of his best work running the football, even though he didn't run nearly as often as he did as a rookie. Accuracy is still a problem. We'll see. I'm not ready to write him off. I feel like maybe I am one of those people that's still on the fence,
Yeah.
honestly.
Actually, maybe you know what? Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I side saddle Josh Allen too, because
right.
I part of it is like part of the problem is that Pete Prisco, my colleague, is so all in on Josh Allen that like I give Pete crap about like most stuff that he's all in on. So it turned, and there was this whole nerds versus jocks Josh Allen debate coming into the draft, and then even coming out when he was drafted by Buffalo. And like, I like Josh Allen as a player, and I think that you could like, there's an unquestioned like room for growth there. And if he does take a leap, then he could become an elite quarterback. It just, when you look like, this is a guy in his second year on a team that, ran the ball a ton and won 10 games and completed less than 60% of his passes. Like, that's hard to do.
Yeah, and the thing about him too is he's a lot of fun to watch, regardless of what side you're on. He's exciting to watch because you just don't know what he's going to do. And, that's part of what makes it hard to fully jump on board, because some of what happened in that playoff game last year was, I can't even explain it. Watching some of that happen, the way that he played in that game was really confusing. And that was a lot of what we saw all season long. And he didn't play his best football against the best teams. And that's what concerns me about, going into 2020. And you talk about the ceiling of this team and his ceiling as a player. I think most of us can agree. You mentioned that nerds versus jocks sort of element to the whole Josh Allen discussion. I think most of us can agree that Josh Allen is better than his detractors thought he would be coming out of college. And I think, that being said, he's not there yet. And
he's also not as good as his like proponents have expected him to be.
There's a middle ground, and he's not there yet. And there's no guarantee that he will get there. And as a passer, he's still pretty flawed. Now they hope that Stephon Diggs can hide some of those flaws. I think he's a guy that runs really good routes. He's got a good catch radius. He gets open. He gets a lot of separation, which is essential for Josh Allen because, tight windows can be a problem. I know he has the great arm, but you need accuracy and timing for tight windows too. So Stephon Diggs could be a good fit, but we also saw that he got pretty frustrated with Kirk Cousins. And
it's like, dude, Kirk Cousins is one of the 5 most accurate quarterbacks in NFL history. Now you're going to catch ball. Like, Josh Allen's going to be winging stuff past your ear.
Yeah, and he's a great deep receiver, Stephon Diggs is, and people think that will automatically fix Josh Allen's deep accuracy, but his deep ball was really, really bad last year, like really bad. People cite the statistic of, 20 yards or more in the air, but if you push that to 30 yards or more, which is the traditional go ball, you're going to throw it about 35 to 40. It took him like almost halfway through the season before he hit one of those, and it was just really, really bad. And so hopefully, they hope that Stephon Diggs can cover that up. And this is the time of year where optimism is overflowing in the league. Josh Allen organized, a get together of about 20 teammates down in Florida, and he and Stephon Diggs are chumming it up. They had a photographer down there taking pictures and videos, and, everything is all well and good. But, this is the time of year where it's easy to be optimistic. He hasn't gotten on the field against the defense yet, not even his own. And, he hasn't gotten on the field against another team. So we need to see some tangible results in terms of improving his accuracy, improving his timing, improving his decision-making. And he needs to be the reason they win games, frankly. And I don't think he was the reason they won games very often last year. Maybe Dallas on Thanksgiving. And, he pulled out some fourth quarter comebacks, but he was largely the one digging those holes to begin with. So, they're still going to have a really good defense, but if you want to take the next step to be a team that can go toe to toe with the Chiefs, which should be the goal, then you need more than a defense. You're going to need to score points and try to keep up with that offense. And, right now it's hard to say whether Josh Allen and this group are ready to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to break it a second. I like to play Madden with teams that are really good on defense and like have upside on offense. I play with the Bills sometimes on Madden, and when I do, I'm like, okay. And this is how I feel like Brian Dable operates too. Is like, okay, we are gonna play awesome defense, and then I'm gonna pick some spots. And if we can hit those shot plays when I'm picking those spots, then we can beat anybody in the NFL. But if you don't hit those spots with Josh Allen, and so like he almost has to like walk this tightrope of being perfect in certain situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the thing that works about how the Bills are set up is there's a margin for error with Josh Allen. He doesn't, what they did a good job of after the first Patriots game last year, Josh Allen was a lot better at taking care of the football.
Yeah.
And they did what you're talking about. They limited those shot plays, and they didn't need to hit that many of them to win a game. And they didn't need Josh Allen to throw for 300 yards, which he seems incapable of doing at times. They just needed
He didn't do it last year.
Right. He hasn't done it yet in his career. So
he doesn't have a single 300-yard passing game in his career.
I'm
fairly
certain. I'm fairly certain.
I believe you.
It's a topic of conversation because a lot of people, his fans, will say that he doesn't need to do that for them to win.
His career high is 266.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
He's had 300 total yards at times when you combine the rushing, but never thrown for 300 yards.
He has 11 games in his 2-year career of over 200 yards. No, that's not right. Excuse me. No, 15. Excuse me.
Yeah, he's often not throwing for 200 in some of these games that they win, and he's pulling out. He does play well in the fourth quarter. He's a really good leader, which some people question, believe it or not, coming out of college. People I talked to wondered about his ability to command a locker room. I think he's done that pretty well in Buffalo. I think guys like playing with him, like to follow him. And he does do some great work in the fourth quarter. He's really good in the red zone because his legs are such a weapon. And so when they get down there, they tend to have the ability to convert.
They use him a little bit like a poor man's Cam Newton, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, and he's not afraid. He actually likes to take the hits. I won't even say he's not afraid.
Maybe poor man's is even unfair to him.
Right.
I don't want that's not a pejorative comment.
He scored a lot of touchdowns on the ground the last couple of years. He's a weapon down there. He can throw the ball in the red zone too because the arm allows him to squeeze the ball into tight windows. So he's been pretty good in some of those areas. I think it's situational football. It's when they need to lean on him and throw the ball a lot, it becomes a bit of a problem. But he had these moments. It's part of why I say I'm on the fence still, and I'm not 100% ready to write him off, but I'm not ready for them to throw $40 million a year at him either, because I don't think they quite know what they have yet, and I think they want to know what they have, but I think he's a really confounding player because of some of the highs and some of the really, head scratching lows to put it lightly. So he is the big variable that is hard to pin down about this Bills team, because outside of the quarterback position, you can say pretty much without any doubt that they have the best roster in the AFC East. They've done a really good job. Building.
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and discuss the rest of that roster. By the way, Josh Allen, 30 passing touchdowns, 17 rushing touchdowns in his career. After the break, we will talk about the rest of that roster. Okay, so I agree, Matthew. I think it's like you look at and I think I like the way that Brandon Beane built it too, and Sean McDermott built it. And for those that might not be initiated in it, those guys sort of work in a Pete Carroll, John Schneider style, right? Is that fair?
I think Brandon Beane has more power than people give him credit for.
But McDermott came first.
He did.
And was hired, and then he was like, I want Brandon Beane to come. They work in concert together, but Brandon Beane maybe has the ultimate say-so. And I think maybe John Schneider might be there now with Pete Carroll, just because of the success they had.
But yeah, Sean McDermott got there first, and it didn't work with Doug Whaley. That's
right. He was there with Doug.
Yes. So what happened was they hired Sean McDermott in January.
Yeah,
and that was 2017. They went, 4.5, 5 months, whatever it was, immediately after the draft, fired Doug Whaley and all of his scouts, and then hired Brandon Beane a few weeks later.
It didn't work with Doug Whaley is sort of a common theme.
Yes, and they weren't planning on firing Doug Whaley when they hired Sean McDermott. He was part of the search, but once Sean McDermott got there, I think they realized these guys aren't matched up, and the head coach and GM need to be matched up. And that's part of why they didn't take a quarterback in 2017, which is a topic people in Buffalo don't like, but they traded the pick that became Patrick Mahomes, and Deshaun Watson was still on the board. And part of it,
by the way,
because
it is interesting how that draft, because like nobody, the Bears catch endless crap for taking Trubisky instead of Mahomes or Watson, but like the Bills get a pass, the Browns kind of get a pass, right? Like
basically every team in the top 10 probably
the Jaguars get a pass.
The
Panthers could have, like any number of teams could have taken him.
I think the Jaguars is probably the worst one.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
They took a running back in the top 5 who they might not even, like going forward. So
they won't keep him, and they love Deshaun Watson too. That's the worst part.
I know. So yeah, I wouldn't say the Bills get a pass. Every time I remind anyone of it, Bills fans say it's been beaten to death, but I would say it's a relevant topic of conversation because of how everything is structured, right? You're talking about a head coach general manager combo that didn't come in at the same time. Yeah. So Brandon Beane gets there and has to make a lot of these trades that they made, to gather, picks for the 2018 draft and then go after the quarterback, because they weren't totally comfortable doing it when they had a GM and scouting staff that they didn't trust. So a lot of disjointedness about how it started, but now, definitely very much on the same page and have been slowly building to what you see now, which I think is a really competitive roster. The question that a lot of people around the league, probably fewer in town, a lot of people are on board with what they've got, but a lot of people around the league say this is a great roster. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are doing a great job, but I don't know if they have the quarterback right. And that's the big question.
What's the undersold story that not enough people might be talking? Because I think I really like this is. I mean, we spent the first half of this podcast talking about Josh Allen, but I mean, like as we know, I mean, like it's not. We're not just being lazy and hitting the quarterback angle. Like if he blows up in 2020, this team has Super Bowl aspirations. If his ceiling looks as we said before. So what's the story that maybe is flying under the radar?
I think they did a really good job building this defense to the point where it might be better than it was a year ago. And that was a really good defense last year. They kept a lot of the key pieces, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, these guys that are continuing to grow together, but they also retooled the defensive line. We'll see what happens with Ed Oliver after his offseason arrest, but even if he's suspended at any point, he's still a guy that I would expect to take a pretty big step forward. They signed Quentin Jefferson, Mario Addison, Vernon Butler, drafted AJ Epinesa. They lost Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips, but I think the defensive line on paper looks better than it was. And that's really been the only thing you can poke holes in about this defense, is that they don't get an elite pass rush, and they're not top end in that regard. They might have a chance to be that in 2020. And, we'll see what happens at cornerback. They signed Josh Norman. If he can have a bounce back year, then all of a sudden that secondary that was already one of the best in the league could get even better. So they've done a nice job. They have a
hilarious number of former Carolina Panthers on their roster.
It is.
I mean, it's like absurd.
There's so many of them in the front office. The director of player personnel is Dan Morgan.
Former awesome linebacker.
Right. It starts there. Pretty much everybody seems like has some tie to Carolina. That they hired Eric Washington to be the defensive line coach this year, and then go out and sign Vernon Butler and Mario Addison immediately.
And they already had Star Lotulelei. AJ Klein was with
they added AJ Klein.
AJ Klein
Norman.
Is like for whatever reason I don't know why he's like a recurring gag on this podcast. Like, so John Breach did a video hit and was like pounding the table about how the Bills defense had been transformed into like an elite unit because they got AJ Klein. So we mentioned AJ Klein. I don't know why like AJ Klein is humorous to our listeners, but I mean, yeah, like Klein, Norman, Lotulelei, Addison, Vernon Butler. Who am I missing?
Dean Marlowe.
I mean,
been with Sean McDermott
Josh
forever.
Norman, obviously. I mean, it's insane.
The first year they got Kelvin Benjamin. They had a few other guys. Mike Tolbert had a brief stint here. So they've pretty much run the gamut in terms of former Carolina.
Do you think that's a situation where it's like okay, we want to supplement our roster with guys who it's just sort of like the thing, like, it's hard to know what you're getting when you bring up an NFL player into your building most of the time, even if you've watched their film and even if you've talked to them a couple times. But if you worked with them before, you know what you're getting. That's got to be it, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's a big thing. And I think it gets misconstrued as like laziness, right? Where people think, oh, they're just going with what they know. But they have a philosophy when it comes to free agency that it's really hard to mold a guy in free agency. If you draft a guy that maybe is imperfect from a football character standpoint or anything like that, you feel like your culture is strong enough that that guy's still impressionable enough that you can, mold him in your image. Free agency, it's a lot harder to do that. Those guys have been in the league, and they've,
sure.
They are who they are in a lot of ways, and so they prefer to go with guys that they either have firsthand experience working with, or somebody on staff has firsthand experience, or they can get that intel. Stephon Diggs is a good example. Their director of college scouting is Terrence Gray, who was in Minnesota. And so, yeah, Stephon Diggs may be viewed as, this guy who's a malcontent or could be a problem in the locker room. Well, Terrence Gray scouted him. He was there when they brought him in and obviously still has ties there. So they felt like they know what they're getting. And yeah, it may not be the picture perfect cookie cutter football character, ideal teammate guy, but they know what they're getting. They know how to deal with him. And I think you see that with a lot of guys. Quentin Jefferson they brought in. Dan Morgan was in Seattle for years before coming to Buffalo. So a lot of those relationships matter. The Carolina one's a running joke in town because so many, but that's what they know. Those guys were there forever. And
so is it sort of part of, like, I mean, not to dive into it, but I think it's like part of it too has got to be, hey, look, we've established this culture. We're not going to go out and bring in, three guys we don't know who might undermine what we've built, right?
100%. And a big thing Brandon Beane has said to me before is the guys in the locker room pay attention to who you pay in free agency or who you pay that's on your roster. And if you're paying somebody, you want to make sure that when that guy comes into the room, he does things the right way. He doesn't have to be a choir boy, but he's not going to be a zero from a work ethic standpoint and a bad teammate. And then people in the locker room say, geez, this guy's making all this money. I haven't even gotten an extension yet. And, how should I feel? And maybe I'm not as bought in as I thought I was. And Starlo Tulele is a good example because, performance wise, you can poke holes in what he's done here, but it's a guy that is well respected in the room and a guy that, people, lean on as a leader. And so, yeah, his price tag's big, but he brings some stuff to the table. I think the other thing this offseason in particular is they recognized pretty early because free agency was at the onset of the coronavirus and everything that was going on.
Oh, that's interesting.
You had to react pretty quickly. And I wasn't even convinced at the start that this is what they were doing. But as time has gone on, I think they realized they weren't going to be in the building for a while. They might not be on the field for a while. And so if you got a new defensive line coach and you're going to bring in some new pieces on the line, you want guys that know the system and that know what's expected. I think that's part of why, they went with a lot of continuity on the offensive line. It wasn't a great group last year, but they're bringing everybody back. And those new additions on defense, EJ Gaines is another one they added, guys that have either played there before or played with these coaches in some capacity that they hope will help them, hit the ground running a little bit better whenever training camp does start.
See, I think that's an interesting, and I think you're right. I think you're spot on. So this is a totally different example, but I think it's kind of fascinating. So like Georgia Tech, right? Their basketball team, in the middle of February, like late, it's like February 15th or something like that. No, actually, I'll take it back. It was like maybe the beginning of March, whatever. I can't remember what it was, but like it's the early onset of coronavirus, and we know it's sort of coming, but we don't, like, nobody's sort of on lockdown. And Georgia Tech all of a sudden is like, we're withdrawing from the ACC tournament, and we're not going to continue to appeal this NCAA case. We're taking our sanctions now. And everybody's like, what? Like you're like a 6 seed. It's like what is happening? And then it's like, oh, as it turns out, that was actually smart because they just took their penalty in a year where there is no NCAA tournament. So I think some smart teams were able to sort of like just say, hey, look, there's a chance this goes really sideways. Let's make contingency plans. It does seem like maybe Buffalo did that too.
Yeah, when an off season goes the way this one went and continues to go, Sean McDermott said at the beginning, he said, the team that handles it the best will have some sort of competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily, it's a running joke around here a couple of years ago before the 2016 season. Around this time, Rex Ryan got up to the lectern and at the end of minicamp and said, we won the off season. I'll challenge any team. Nobody wins in OTAs and minicamp. Most years, everybody's doing the same thing.
It's a war of attrition.
Exactly. But this year, with so many variables about how you can handle it, and so many, if you have a new coach, you're not feeling great about how everything's going because you haven't been on the field and you're not able to implement various aspects of your system or your program, and you're falling behind. The Bills, and say what I often think continuity is used as too much of a crutch for coaches and decision makers. Continuity equals job security, right? Oh, right. We got to have continuity because we got to see this thing through. I got to collect another year of paychecks.
Yeah.
But in this case, they have a team that won 10 games, probably would have won 11 if they played their starters against the Jets in the season finale. And they brought back basically the whole coaching staff with some minor adjustments, same two coordinators, same head coach, same quarterback, same offensive line, two of the same starting receivers, adding in a number one that they desperately lacked. Most of the guys on defense are going to be the same as far as starters, and the only ones who are new, they're very familiar with. Yeah. So if continuity is an asset this offseason, then the Bills are in great shape because they've done a good job of keeping this group together, which was a message Sean McDermott sent the day after they lost to the Texans. They wanted to keep this group together. Whether that's, whether some of the pieces are right, we'll see, obviously. But I think they feel like some of the things that they're doing and some of the ways that they've handled this will be an advantage to them at some point. And, who knows? Maybe they're right.
No, I mean, I think it's entirely possible. I've said all along, it's like I think the teams that are going to win the most games this year are teams that have continuity at quarterback, head coach, quarterback, offensive coordinator, and offensive line and I think we might see it manifest itself in the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season where teams who have these new pieces in place are sort of trying to figure it out, especially offensively. Whereas the Bills should be able to hit the ground running in some respects and play well out of the gate. And in a league where you only play 16 games, in a year where we might only play 12, I mean, like nobody knows. I mean, we assume that we're going to get 16 now, I think, but like if it's shortened, that magnifies each game even more. And so those first 4 weeks could be preseason for some teams. It might be the regular season for others. So what is a successful season for the Bills in 2020 as we stand here in early June? I mean, it unfortunately for the city of Buffalo and Bills fans, it does feel like anything less than 10 wins will be disappointing, right?
Yeah, anything less than 10 wins. And I would take it a step further and say they need to win a playoff game to show progress. And, even if there's a lot of people around here picking them to win 12, 13 games, and that has not been the case since I got here in 2014. There's never been any level of optimism like this. And I think you could go back to the 90s before, you could see people this excited about this team. But to me, a lot of it, and I think this was the case last year too. People said, what does a successful season look like? And I said, if they, the record might not matter, but if they know that Josh Allen is their quarterback, that's a successful season. And last year, I didn't feel like they ended the season knowing that for certain. And I think that's a similar bar this year. They have a tougher schedule for sure. Last year, they had a pretty easy schedule. They did not perform well against teams with winning records. The only playoff team that they beat was the Tennessee Titans, and that was before they benched Marcus Mariota. It was actually the last game before he got benched. So that was the only playoff team they beat. So going into this year, they've got some tougher opponents. They play the AFC West.
Was that insane, West. Like 5 missed field goal game?
Yes, there was a lot. And then Marcus Mariota went over the line of scrimmage, but maybe didn't
Yeah,
go
that's
over the
right.
line of scrimmage. That
Yeah,
was
that's right.
a weird game down in Tennessee, and
Yeah.
they barely won, which they did a lot last year, barely winning and pulling games out that
Yeah,
looked like
Cairo
they were going
Santos
to
0
lose.
for 4 on field
He
goals.
got cut, I think, that week too. He
Yeah.
got cut, and Mariota got benched. So that was sort of the awakening for the Titans a little bit. So this year, I think you want to see this team beat those good teams and be more competitive against those good teams. And I think part of, if you're going to be sold on Josh Allen, he needs to, maybe throw for 300 yards once in a while. Hit more deep balls, become more accurate, maybe complete 60% of his passes. We're not talking turning him into Drew Brees or anything, but and I think in the end, yeah, get to 10 wins again or get to the playoffs again, whatever it looks like. Get to the playoffs again and win a game.
Right.
Beat a playoff team. Don't get out coached by Bill O'Brien. That's a problem.
That is
Like
a problem.
don't lose to a team like that.
There's
And yeah,
no excuse to lose that playoff game.
no, the way that they started, and that's where yeah, Sean McDermott's a good coach, and he's gotten this team turned around. But
But he turtled up a little bit.
you need to find out if the quarterback and the coach are built to win in the playoffs. And I think the bar is a little bit different in Buffalo because they've been so bad for so long. And this is the guy who ended the playoff drought. And this is the quarterback who looks like, the best prospect they've had at the position since the 90s. But you have to readjust the expectations in the bar because otherwise you become like the Bengals, making the playoffs and being okay with that and being okay with your first round exits. And I don't think people around here are going to be okay with that. I think they want to see this team, schedule or not, rise up and win some games, beat some teams that are considered among the best in the league, and then go into the playoffs and win a game and see how far they can, take this thing. And I think to do that, you need not only for the defense to maintain what it was, but you do need the offense to take a pretty substantial step forward if they're going to be a threat to close out games and to pull away. When you take a 16-0 lead on the road in the playoffs, you need to be able to put your foot on the gas and pull away.
Yeah. All right. So I think I like that. It's sort of a joint, it goes hand in hand. Like they need to win a playoff game, but as part of that process, basically Josh Allen needs to take a step forward and prove that he is in fact the guy. I mean, right?
Yeah, it's never in that's the problem I always have. 9 wins doesn't look the same every year, right? And so people will always ask me versions of that. How many wins do the Bills need to get this year for, this person to keep their job or this, it's never in a vacuum. It's never, so
like if they go
binary.
8-8 and Josh Allen hasn't like a monster leap forward, then like you're like, okay, that sucks that we went 8-8.
Right. You're not firing anybody. You're not firing anybody, and you're extending, you're picking up Josh Allen's option and feeling okay. There's always so many circumstances that can contribute to, 10 wins or can contribute to 7 wins. You could have some bad injuries that make life a lot tougher. You could drag Josh Allen to 11 wins, but he doesn't look good. And then you're not feeling all that great about the long term, of this.
You lose the first round of the playoffs, you win 11 games, and Josh Allen takes a step back. That's a worse season than
exactly. And then you're sitting there, and what do you do with his contract, right? Yeah. They have to make that decision on his 5th-year option next year. So I think really, I
think that's. I mean, I would almost say that like at this point, that's a no-brainer. But it comes down to like, okay, if he's the guy, and this is happening with Dak Prescott right now. And not to belabor the Josh Allen point and keep you on here for longer than we promised, but it is interesting. Like, you're going to pick up his 5th-year option, but after his 3rd year, he's eligible for a contract extension. Are you going to push it back? Because then if he takes another leap or like he takes another step forward, you're going to have to give him like Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes money. And like all of a sudden that gets scary.
Yeah. They're going to be in a weird spot with his contract. And they're also, do you want to be where the Bears are with Mitch Trubisky?
No.
Would you,
No.
Would you rather have an answer? I think one way or the other, you want to have an answer, right? And this off season, a lot of people ask me, why aren't they going after Cam Newton or somebody to upgrade the backup quarterback spot? And inside the building, the message has been, we don't want to cast any doubt. Josh Allen is our guy. And by doing that, there would be some doubt. And we don't want there to be doubt because we believe that he's going to take that step and be that guy that we're going to want to pay. They're already planning, that aspect of their salary cap, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. But you don't want to be where the Jaguars were, for instance, with Blake Bortles, right? Where you win all these games in spite of your quarterback, but think because you're winning, you need to pay the quarterback and continue on that way. Whereas, the Bears have brought in some competition now and are trying to kind of recalibrate their rebuild under the idea that they probably got it wrong. They don't know for sure, but they're leaning that way that they got it wrong.
Right.
And
They're in the Bortles spot because they want Mitchell Trubisky. Like if Mitchell Trubisky throws for like 4,000 yards and 28 touchdown passes, they're just going to give him a contract extension.
Right. That's part of the
disaster.
Making that decision is difficult. And I've often thought that the guy who makes the decision is often not the guy who's qualified to do it because, Ryan Pace has a vested interest in Mitchell Trubisky and being right about that. His whole professional reputation rides on that. Brandon Beane's professional reputation rides on whether Josh Allen is worth a new contract. And so they can confirm that by simply giving him one. But that's what Dave Caldwell did with Blake Bortles, and he's managed to stay employed. So it's not always a make or break, but it is an important decision and one that you'd like to have clarity on. You don't want to be in a spot where you're unsure. And I think that is as important as anything with the Bills this year because it's year 3. And if by year 3 you're still unsure, then you probably have your answer, whether you want to admit it or not.
Man, this is the Bills are one of the most interesting teams in football this year because of this Josh Allen thing and because of their history over the past. I mean, heck, they hadn't been to the playoffs since Wade Phillips, right? I mean, it's crazy.
So many primetime games too. It's reflected in the schedule, and it's what I've got my fingers crossed that the season goes on as scheduled, and hopefully, hope against hope that maybe there's a chance fans can get in the buildings because. This is
Bills Mafia deserves this.
They've been waiting for some national respect. They're finally getting it, and I have no idea which way it's going to go, but I am really fascinated to follow it. It's the most interesting team I've gotten to cover, and I sat through some Rex Ryan years, so this is interesting in a much better way than that was, and I think it's going to be a fun year to follow this team regardless of what happens.
All right, Matthew Fairburn covering the Bills for The Athletics. Make sure and check him out on Twitter at Matthew Fairburn. Read him on The Athletic and check out the podcast, The Buffalo Beat, a show about the Buffalo Bills. This is fun, man. We should do it again. And man, I hope you're right. I hope we get fans in there. I hope that we don't have to see 25 Bills fans on a Zoom call jumping through tables. Like that. I don't need that. Although I will say this, I feel like. I was discussing this with somebody, and I don't know if it was on the radio or what, but it was like, if you were power ranking teams, fan bases most likely to completely ignore a pandemic and to show up and show out and like just be animals in the parking lot, it would be the Bills would be easily the number 1 team, right?
Oh, 100%. I'm already, I've gone through the full range of possibilities in my head of like, am I even going to be at games? How's this all going to work? What's it going to look like to cover the NFL this year? And I'm just already envisioning like covering games from my living room and hearing people outside, like going crazy. It's going to be a weird, potentially could be a weird year, but I would, I hope against hope that, that Bills Steelers Sunday Night Football, I mean, Pittsburgh being a 3-hour drive up the highway, that could be, that's just such a classic. It's such a classic matchup. And there's so many of those this year that they've got the Chiefs at home on prime time. It's a lot. There's a lot of excitement about this team and so much unknown. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully hopefully they stay interesting. Yeah, maybe we can do this again. Rope Pete Prisco in here and
Pete predicted
make it really interesting.
He predicted before last year that the Bills would win the division in 2020. So I gotta give him his props there. He's a favorite among Bills Mafia for that reason. He's a hero for them. Maybe he's got a sense of which way the wind blows. You don't need to. Right. You don't want Bills Mafia coming after you on Twitter.
Absolutely. I've learned that. I've definitely learned that. You gotta be careful with those people.
That's right. All right, man. Appreciate it again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.